Okay, so we are going to finish up the Mesozoic by talking about the Cretaceous period. The word Cretaceous is derived from the word for chalky because the first fossils found in this period, from this period, were found in chalky deposits in England. It lasted from 150 million years ago to 70 million years ago, around there. Actually, though, there is a lot of debate about whether the Jurassic and the Cretaceous should be considered separate periods. Because if you look at our timeline of life, almost every other period has a big mass extinction. But there isn't any event in between the Jurassic and the Cretaceous. Nothing really happened. We just said, like, oh, it's the Cretaceous now. So there's a lot of debate about exactly where the division should be. But anyway, we're going to talk about the Cretaceous. This period is dominated by dinosaurs, of course, and particularly dinosaurs on land. In fact, dinosaurs dominated the land more than any other animal had ever dominated the land up to that point. One of the largest carnivores, we know now not the largest carnivore, but one of the largest was the Tyrannosaurus Rex. It was a theropod, and it could grow up to 40 feet long. Like other theropods, it may have had feathers, and especially as a juvenile. Now, paleontologists do not believe that adult Tyrannosaurus rexes had feathers because we believe that feathers evolved as a way to keep animals warm. And adult Tyrannosaurus rexes were large enough that they did not need feathers. So most paleontologists believe that only juveniles had feathers, which I think is really interesting. Another theropod from this period, and this one did have feathers, we know, is the Velociraptor. It could grow 6 feet long, and they were a very bird-like theropod. Another giant dinosaur that lived at this time was the Triceratops. It was an herbivore, and it had these 3 horns on its head, or on its face. Those were probably used for defense. But we think this big frill was probably used for show, just to display and say, look how awesome I am and how great my frill is. In the oceans, the Mosasaurus was a giant lizard. My cards are everywhere. And it thrived especially during the late Cretaceous period. They ate ammonites and fish, and we talked about in the Triassic how ammonites became very dominant during the Mesozoic. So those helped feed mosasaurs. Now, mammals also continued to evolve in this period, and something super interesting happened. One of the early branches of mammals is called the Monotreme, and they lay eggs instead of giving births. 2 monotremes actually still exist today, and you might be able to guess by looking at this guy. A platypus is a kind of monotreme, and so is an echidna. But one of the earliest was the Steropodon, right here. And that's the oldest monotreme that we found evidence for, and that evolved in the Cretaceous. The oldest marsupial also dates from this period. It's called the Cinedelphus. And marsupials, you may remember, are mammals who have pouches. They give birth when the fetus is not fully developed, and the fetus continues to develop in the pouch. Something really exciting happened in the world of plants in the Cretaceous, and I'm going to move my cards down so you can see. The very first flowering plants appeared in the Cretaceous. They're called angiosperms. That's what we call flowering plants. And the very first ones ever appear in the Cretaceous. What is interesting about flowering plants is that they have a concentrated amount of sugar found in the fruit that flowering plants produce, and that turns out to be very important to warm-blooded animals that we'll talk a lot more about when we get to the Cenozoic era.